The first rock hit my living room window at around 2 a.m., shattering the glass and jolting me out of a dead sleep. The second came seconds later, slamming into the kitchen window with a crack loud enough to set off my car alarm. I bolted upright, heart pounding, barefoot on the cold tile as I grabbed the baseball bat by the front door. When I peeked outside, I saw her, Olivia Cranston. 40-something, bleach blonde bob, robe flapping in the wind like she was summoning demons. She was standing on my lawn, one hand clutching a landscaping rock, the other waving it like she was conducting a symphony of chaos. The porch light caught the wild look in her eyes. "You think you can park that rust bucket on this street?" she shrieked, hurling another rock. It missed me by inches and bounced off the siding. That was the moment I knew I wasn't dealing with just another entitled HOA board member. I was dealing with the Queen Karen of the cul-de-sac. My name's Carson Veller. I'm 38, own a small plumbing business, and have lived in this neighborhood for 10 years. I've always kept to myself, paid my dues, and stayed out of HOA politics. That all changed when Olivia got elected HOA president last fall. From day one, she was a nightmare. Suddenly, my work van was an eyesore. My backyard shed violated neighborhood aesthetic. Even the color of my mailbox was too aggressive. I tried to ignore her until she started fining me $200 a week for unauthorized storage of commercial equipment, aka my legally parked van in my own driveway. That's when I installed security cameras. And thank God I did. After that rock-throwing incident, I didn't go outside. I called the cops, sat tight, and watched the footage from my phone. Crystal clear, full-color, time-stamped video of Olivia Cranston vandalizing my property. And when the responding officer showed up, she was still on my lawn, panting like she'd just finished a marathon, rock in hand. "She's lying. He threatened me," she screamed, pointing at my house like I was the lunatic in this story. The cop looked at her, then at the busted windows behind me. "Ma'am, did you throw those rocks?" I was defending myself. "That van has been a security threat for months." I handed him my phone. He watched the footage. His eyebrows went up. "You're definitely gonna want to see this," I said. He sighed and walked her to the squad car. She went from yelling to crying in under 10 seconds. Of course, she was released that night, thanks to some nonsense about pending investigation, but I wasn't going to let this go. The next morning, I met with a lawyer. "Do you have any documentation of her previous harassment?" he asked. "Better. I've got a digital file cabinet full, fines, letters, emails. I've been keeping record for months." That's when we put together the plan. I wasn't just going to sue Olivia, I was going after the HOA itself. Because here's the thing, Olivia didn't act alone. The HOA board knew what she was doing. Maybe they didn't tell her to throw rocks, but they'd backed every insane fine, every policy change, and ignored my multiple complaints. They were complicit. It all started 6 months ago when Olivia first got into power. She immediately rewrote the parking rules. Only commercial vehicles with aesthetic harmony were allowed, whatever that meant. Then she had the board pass a motion prohibiting any non-residential tools or equipment that were visible from the street. That's when she started targeting me. I own a modest plumbing business, one van, decals on the side, nothing flashy. It's not like I was running a warehouse out of my garage. But apparently, Olivia had a personal vendetta against tradespeople. "We're trying to elevate the neighborhood," she told me once during a board meeting, "not turn it into a hardware store parking lot." I tried reasoning with the board. I went to the meetings. I even offered to park the van off-site if they helped offset the cost. They laughed in my face. So I kept records, every letter, every voicemail. Every time Olivia walked by my house taking photos and muttering to herself, the icing on the cake, an audio recording I captured with one of my garage cameras. "I'm gonna make sure he's gone by the end of the year," Olivia told another board member, Margaret, something as they stood on my driveway one night. "You can't just force him out," Margaret said, sounding unsure. Olivia huffed. "Watch me." I played that for my attorney. He smiled. We filed the lawsuit within the week: property damage, harassment, trespassing, and abuse of authority. But that was just the beginning. My lawyer also filed a motion demanding a full audit of the HOA's financial records. If Olivia had gone this far with me, we figured it wasn't the first time she'd crossed the line. And man, were we right. 3 days later, I got a call from Derek, one of the neighbors who'd always kept quiet. "Hey, Carson. You didn't hear this from me, but Olivia's been paying her landscaper with HOA funds. Like, thousands, and it's not even for community property, it's for her own yard." That night, I hosted a barbecue. Not a party, just burgers, drinks, and an open laptop screen showing the footage of Olivia smashing my windows. "Is that Olivia?" someone asked. "Yep," I said, flipping a patty. "She's the reason we're paying more in HOA fees this year." People started talking, comparing stories. "Margaret, yes, that Margaret approached me quietly." "I didn't know she'd gone this far," she whispered. "If you need a statement, I'll give one." By the end of the night, I had 5 witness statements, 3 new complaints, and an entire neighborhood ready to flip the script. The final straw came when I received a bogus citation taped to my mailbox. Unauthorized gathering of more than 5 unrelated individuals on private property. Signed by Olivia, of course. That's when I knew she wasn't just petty and entitled. She was drunk on power. And I was going to take it all away. I handed Margaret's written statement to my attorney the next morning, still smelling faintly of lighter fluid and charcoal from the night before. She hadn't just confirmed Olivia's obsession with targeting me, she described a private board meeting where Olivia dismissed concerns about rising HOA dues by saying, "They'll forget once we redo the entrance sign and slap some fancy rocks around it." That sign hadn't gone up. Neither had the landscaping. But the HOA's reserve fund had dropped by nearly $30,000 in under 6 months. By noon, my lawyer had filed a formal request for forensic accounting, citing misappropriation of HOA funds. The judge approved it, which meant the HOA's books were now open for a full audit. That's when things turned from petty to criminal. The forensic accountant, some quiet woman named Lynn with a voice like dry paper, called us 4 days later, sounding more amused than surprised. "Your HOA president has been cutting checks to a company called Cranston Outdoor Concepts for 8 months, she said. "Let me guess," I said. "It's not a real business." "Oh, it's real," Lynn replied. "It's registered to Olivia's brother at a P.O. box across town. And it's billed over $22,000 for decorative stonework consulting." I didn't even have to say anything. "There's nothing in the HOA records to show any completed work," Lynn continued. "No permits, no vendor receipts, no photos, nothing, just invoices and processed checks." I'm flagging this for potential fraud. 2 days later, detectives from the county's white-collar crimes unit were knocking on Olivia's door, and half the neighborhood stood on their porches pretending to do yard work while watching her try to explain why she needed a stonework consultant when the only new addition to the neighborhood was a single dying juniper bush near the front gate. Meanwhile, I had my own plans brewing. See, it wasn't just about taking her down. This HOA had been a problem long before Olivia got her claws into it. The rest of the board had rubber-stamped her every whim, and now that the spotlight was on her, they were all scrambling like roaches. I ran into Councilman DeSoto at a local development meeting that week. I'd done some plumbing work on his rental properties years back, and he remembered me. "You're the guy suing the HOA over in Oak Ridge Pines, right?" he asked. "That's me." "They messed with the wrong plumber," he chuckled once, then got serious. "You know, there's a provision in the city charter. If an HOA is found guilty of financial misconduct and fails to correct it within 90 days, the city can step in and revoke their self-governance." "You're saying the city could take over the HOA? Not permanently, but long enough to restructure it, appoint a temporary administrator, and hold a new election under supervision." I filed that information away like a loaded weapon. The next HOA board meeting was held in the community clubhouse. The usual 10 chairs were all filled, and another 20 people stood in the back. Word had spread. The broken windows, the bogus citations, the barbecue, and now the fraud investigation. People wanted answers. Olivia showed up late, wearing oversized sunglasses and acting like she didn't notice the silence that followed her into the room. "This meeting will come to order," she muttered, slapping a clipboard down like it owed her money. I raised my hand. She ignored it. I spoke anyway. "What exactly did Cranston Outdoor Concepts do for our neighborhood, Olivia?" Someone near the back said. "Yeah, I've never seen them work on anything." Another voice. "My dues went up this year. I want to know where they went." Olivia's jaw tensed. "That's not on the agenda for today." "Neither were the cops," I said, "but they seemed to think it was worth a visit." She tried to move on, but the room had turned. People started demanding a full readout of HOA spending. Olivia refused. That's when Margaret stood up. "I move for a vote of no confidence," she said, her voice trembling but firm. Olivia's head snapped toward her. "You don't have the authority." Margaret glanced around. "I think we all do." All in favor, hands shot up, mine included. All opposed, silence. There was no official process in the bylaws for removing the president mid-term, but that didn't stop the crowd from shouting her down and demanding answers. Someone called the city. Another neighbor, Jeff, a retired postal worker, stood up and read the section of the municipal code about financial misconduct. "The city can dissolve the board if we petition for it," he read aloud. "We just need 25 signatures." We had 31 by the end of the night. The next morning, Olivia filed a restraining order against me. It was laughable. She claimed I'd orchestrated a public smear campaign and intimidated her with weapons. My lawyer shredded it in court. The judge dismissed the order in under 10 minutes and warned Olivia about filing frivolous claims. But she wasn't done. That afternoon, I got a notice taped to my garage door again, unsigned, citing me for hosting an illegal political rally on private property. I took it straight to the city attorney's office. 2 days later, the mayor's office issued a public memo stating that the city was investigating Oak Ridge Pines HOA for alleged abuses of authority, financial misconduct, and improper enforcement of local ordinances. It made the local paper. The headline read, "Neighborhood Watchdog or Pocket Tyrant, HOA President Under Fire." That same week, Olivia's brother was arrested for fraud. They traced nearly $36,000 in fake invoices back to his P.O. box. When asked why he thought he could get away with it, he reportedly said, "Olivia told me the HOA doesn't get audited." Turns out, they hadn't been audited in over 5 years. The city stepped in after that. A temporary administrator was assigned to oversee the HOA's finances. Olivia was suspended from the board pending investigation. Margaret was appointed interim president until a new election could be held, but I wasn't finished. The civil lawsuit moved forward. Property damage, harassment, defamation. My lawyer requested damages for the broken windows, lost business from the fines, and emotional distress. Olivia's attorney tried to settle. We declined. During deposition, Olivia tried to paint herself as the victim. She claimed the rocks were symbolic, not intended to cause harm. My lawyer played the footage again. The timestamp, the angle, the force. No jury was going to see it any other way. Then came the kicker. Lynn, the forensic accountant, discovered that Olivia had also used HOA funds to pay for a private security system on her own home. Not the clubhouse, not the gates, just her personal residence. Cameras, motion lights, the works. Over $8,000 billed to the HOA under community safety improvements. That tipped the scales. The city added embezzlement to the list of charges. The DA got involved. Olivia was formally charged with misappropriation of community funds, vandalism, and filing a false police report. She was arrested at her house in full view of half the neighborhood. I watched from my front porch, arms crossed, as they led her to the cruiser. She didn't scream this time. Didn't say a word. just stared at the ground like it might swallow her up. Good. By the end of the month, the HOA board had been dissolved. A special election was scheduled, and I was nominated to run by Margaret, by practically everyone on my street. I didn't say yes, not right away. I wasn't in this for power. I just wanted peace, accountability. A neighborhood where people could park their vans, mow their lawns, and have a barbecue without being fined into submission. But when the ballots were printed, my name was on them anyway. And judging by the way the community had come together, people who'd never spoken before now organizing cleanups, helping file petitions, and swapping legal advice, I had a feeling we'd never let another Olivia take over again. The election was only 2 weeks away, and though I hadn't officially accepted the nomination, my evenings were spent meeting with neighbors on porches, in garages, and at kitchen tables. People who'd once nodded politely in passing were now leaning in across cups of coffee and asking hard questions about transparency, about oversight, about how we'd stop this from ever happening again. I didn't have polished answers, but I had something better: receipts. Literally. A binder full of HOA purchase records the city's interim administrator had released to residents under the public review clause. Once word got out, people took turns flipping through it, page by page, like it was a true crime novel. And in some ways it was. Olivia's personal security system had been the tip of the iceberg. In one entry, $500 had been charged to community morale outreach, and used to buy artisanal cheese platters from a downtown catering company. There had never been a community outreach event. Another record showed over $4,000 spent on consulting with a firm that didn't even have a website and whose listed phone number redirected to a dry cleaner in a completely different state. Then came the real bombshell. The city's interim administrator flagged a payment labeled Structural Integrity Review East Retaining Wall. It was a $5,000 charge issued 6 weeks earlier. The problem? We didn't have an east retaining wall, never had. It wasn't just financial mismanagement anymore. This was fabrication, intentional falsification of expenses with no corresponding work, no inspections, no permits. That meant wire fraud, plain and simple. And since HOA dues had been processed electronically through automatic withdrawals, every fake transaction passed through interstate financial systems. That brought in the feds. 2 agents from a local FBI office showed up at the community center for a closed-door meeting with the temporary administrator and a city attorney. I wasn't invited, but Margaret was, and when she came out, she looked like she'd aged 5 years in 90 minutes. "They're looking at federal charges," she said to me in a low voice. "Not just Olivia, the treasurer too, and possibly the former vice president." I didn't ask her how bad it was. I could see it in her face. That night I got a knock on my door. It was Derek, the quiet neighbor who'd tipped me off about the landscaper scheme earlier. He had a folder in his hands, thick and worn at the edges. "I used to be on the board," he said. "Before Olivia. Back when things were boring and nobody cared." We kept everything in this binder: meeting minutes, expense logs, budget reports. I dug it out of storage when this mess started. I flipped through it. The numbers from 2 years ago didn't even come close to the current expenses. Back then, the HOA operated on less than half the budget Olivia had ballooned it into. She kept asking for more assessments, Derek said. Always said they were temporary, said the city was requiring upgrades. I didn't question it at first. I didn't blame him. Olivia had a way of making people feel like they were the problem if they pushed back. But now the lies were unraveling fast. By the weekend, things reached a boiling point. The community mailbox kiosks, those heavy-duty aluminum stations bolted to concrete slabs, had been tampered with. Someone had pried open the back panel of one and stolen all the mail from half a dozen units. Packages, letters, everything. That wasn't just theft. It was a federal crime. And then people started connecting the dots. The only person with the kiosk master key was the HOA secretary who'd resigned a month ago. The key was supposed to be returned. It hadn't been. And guess who had it last? Her name was Stacy, and she'd been Olivia's closest ally on the board. She'd vanished right after the first audit request was filed, claiming she was taking a break from community service, and had since stopped answering calls. The FBI added mail theft to their investigation. Meanwhile, I was preparing for the upcoming town hall, a forum the interim administrator scheduled to let candidates speak before the election. I didn't plan on giving some polished speech. I just wanted people to know the truth that no amount of fake landscaping or cheese trays was worth what we'd lost. But the night before the event, something strange happened. I came home from a service call to find my garage door open. Nothing was missing, but someone had clearly been inside. My tool racks had been shifted. A shelf near the back had been knocked over. The security camera above the door had been ripped clean off. Whoever did it knew exactly what to disable. I called the sheriff's office, filed the report, and waited, sitting in a camp chair with a flashlight and a crowbar across my lap. Nothing happened. But the message had been sent. The next day, I got a call from the interim administrator. Her tone was clipped, urgent. "We've received word that someone attempted to access the HOA's online banking account using outdated credentials. The system flagged it as a breach attempt." She paused, then added, "It came from a device registered to one of the former board members." Olivia was under house arrest with a GPS ankle monitor pending her court date. Stacy was still missing, which left only one possibility: Vince. The former treasurer. He'd kept a low profile during the scandal, always claiming he just signed the checks and didn't know what Olivia was up to. But now, it looked like he was trying to cover his tracks or worse, move the remaining funds somewhere they couldn't be traced. The city froze the HOA's accounts entirely. No more disbursements, no vendor payments, nothing. It was a financial lockdown. That night at the town hall, I stood in front of over 70 residents packed into the community center. Some sat on folding chairs. Others stood along the walls. The air was thick with tension, and not just because of the investigation. People were angry, tired, embarrassed. I didn't bring notes, just a copy of the old budget from Derek's binder. "I'm not here to tell you I'm perfect," I said. "I'm a plumber, my tools break, my van leaks. And I sure as hell didn't plan on running for anything this year. But I know what it means to fix something when it's broken. You find the leak, you cut out the rot, you replace it with something solid. That's what we need to do here." No applause, just silence, focused, burning silence. That was better. I held up the old budget. 2 years ago, we ran this neighborhood on less than half what we're spending now, and everything still worked. Our dues weren't supposed to build someone's backyard fortress. They were supposed to keep the lights on and the sprinklers running. That's it. A man in the back raised his hand. I recognized him, Greg, a retired contractor who'd lived here for decades. "What's stopping this from happening again?" he asked. I nodded. "Us, transparency, monthly reports posted online, public budget sessions. Independent audits, not just after the fact, and more importantly, no more closed-door decisions. If you live here, you get a vote, period." This time there was a murmur of agreement. A woman near the front crossed her arms, then uncrossed them. A teenager looked up from her phone. Small things. But I noticed. The vote happened 3 days later. I won. Not by a landslide, but by enough. The city certified the results and handed over limited governance authority to the new board. We were under supervision for 6 months while the last of the investigations wrapped up, but we had a mandate to rebuild and a community that wasn't going to look away again. As for Olivia, the charges stuck. Wire fraud, property damage, conspiracy to defraud. Her brother took a plea deal and testified against her in exchange for reduced sentencing. Stacy was eventually picked up in another county, using a fake name at a short-term rental. She folded within hours of questioning, handing over emails and private messages that detailed exactly how they'd siphoned money. Vince cut a deal too. Turned over records, login credentials, and even a flash drive he'd kept just in case. He claimed he didn't know about the full extent of the scam, but the judge didn't buy it. He got 18 months. Olivia got 5 years. The night they took her away, I stood on my porch again. Same spot. Different feeling. No more rocks, no more threats. Just the sound of sprinklers clicking on across the street and a neighbor's dog barking at nothing in particular. I didn't wave goodbye, didn't need to. 3 weeks into my term as president, I was sitting behind a borrowed folding table in the community center, surrounded by a half-assembled stack of legal pads, an outdated laptop, and receipts dating back nearly a decade. I wasn't wearing a tie. I wasn't making speeches. I was auditing every single HOA transaction that hadn't already been flagged by the city or the FBI. What we found next would make everything else Olivia had done look like kindergarten mischief. The red flag came from a batch of handwritten maintenance invoices from 3 years ago, all signed by the same contractor, someone named Lyle R. They were listed as repairs on shared infrastructure: irrigation, drainage grates, signage, repainting. They totaled over $47,000. But none of those repairs had ever been recorded in the city's maintenance logs. And the kicker, we had no Lyle R. on file anywhere. No W-9, no contractor license, no address. I handed the documents to the city's interim administrator, who passed them along to the county building inspector. Within 48 hours, we got confirmation. Every job supposedly done by Lyle R. had either never happened or had already been completed by licensed city crews years earlier. Meaning Olivia's board had submitted duplicate invoices for fake work that was never performed and got reimbursed through HOA dues. The city contacted the district attorney again. This time, the charges were expanded to include organized fraud and money laundering. The HOA, under Olivia's presidency, had effectively been a shell operation to funnel money through dummy vendors and into private pockets. 2 more former board members were arrested within the week. One of them tried to flee the state, but was picked up at a Greyhound station with a burner phone and a suitcase full of prepaid cards. The other turned herself in, providing a full confession that included internal emails showing the board had discussed padding the books to create emergency funds for untraceable expenses. Those emails were forwarded to the federal prosecutor. Meanwhile, I was still trying to run a neighborhood. A group of residents had organized a volunteer committee to replant the neglected median strips along the main roadway. Another team took over scheduling repairs for the rusted swing sets at the park. For the first time in years, people weren't just reacting to HOA decisions, they were making them. Together. Still, not everyone was thrilled. I got a call from a neighbor named Janet, who'd kept quiet during Olivia's reign but now had strong opinions about every decision I made. She accused me of letting the community turn into a democracy free for all, and demanded I reinstate the old rules about architectural uniformity. I invited her to the next board meeting. She showed up with a printed list of complaints and a clipboard. When I asked her which of the homes she thought were violating aesthetics, she named 5. 2 of those owners were in the room. One of them, a retired firefighter named Lewis, stood up and calmly asked her why his new mailbox, which he'd built by hand with his grandson, was a problem. Janet didn't answer. She left before the meeting ended. She didn't come back by the second month. We had a functioning website, a public budget tracker, and an open comment period before every vote. HOA dues were reduced by 25% after we terminated the last of Olivia's fake contracts. We even had a monthly bulletin printed at cost by a local high school student who wanted to start a graphic design business. But the biggest breakthrough came from a tip we never expected. A woman named Dana appeared at the community center on a rainy Wednesday, holding a manila folder and asking for me by name. She said she used to work as a bookkeeper for a landscaping firm that Olivia had contracted before her brother started the fake business. According to Dana, the firm had been let go after refusing to participate in off-the-books billing that would allow Olivia to submit inflated invoices to the HOA. Inside her folder were scanned copies of emails, payment stubs, and a note scribbled in pen. OL wants it split into 2 bills to avoid questions. We turned it over to the authorities. The district attorney added another count of conspiracy and fraud to Olivia's case, along with a subpoena for the landscaping firm's full records. By the time her trial began, Olivia was facing 11 felony charges. She showed up in court wearing a blazer that still had a dry cleaner's sticker on the sleeve, and tried to portray herself as misunderstood. Her attorney claimed she was overwhelmed by the responsibilities of leadership, and that any errors were administrative, not malicious. Then the prosecution played the recorded audio from my garage camera, the one they'd enhanced and cleaned up for clarity. Olivia's voice, clear as day, bragging that she would make sure I was gone by the end of the year. The jury took less than 3 hours to convict her on 10 of the 11 charges. She was sentenced to a minimum of 9 years with no parole eligibility for the first 4. The judge called her actions a deliberate erosion of community trust and a gross betrayal of fiduciary duty. I didn't attend the sentencing. I had a plumbing job across town, and honestly, I didn't need to see her escorted away again. I'd already seen enough. Meanwhile, the new board had officially dissolved the old HOA charter and replaced it with a revised version built with community feedback. The language was clear, the enforcement policies fair, and every major decision now required a majority vote from residents, not just the board. We also set up a reserve fund with real oversight. 3 residents, all with no prior connection to the board, were elected to monitor spending. Every transaction over $500 needed their sign-off. 6 months after Olivia's arrest, we hosted a neighborhood block party not in protest, not in anger, but in celebration. Kids ran around with chalk and water balloons. Someone set up a dunk tank. Louis grilled ribs, and Margaret brought a giant cooler full of homemade lemonade. Derek handed me a paper plate loaded with potato salad and said, "You know, I used to think HOAs were just small-time tyrants with clipboards, but you turned this into something different." I didn't have a clever response. I just nodded and took the plate. No more rocks through windows. No more citations for imaginary offenses. Just neighbors, music, and the smell of charcoal on a breeze that for once carried no threats. After the sun went down, I walked past the median strips lined with fresh flowers, past houses where porch lights glowed softly, and down a street that no longer felt like a battleground. Olivia had tried to turn the neighborhood into her kingdom. In the end, we turned it back into a community. And that was worth every broken window.